Welcome to How Things Connect, where we share insight and wisdom on healing, empowerment, and regeneration. I'm truly honored today to have as my guest the extraordinary Duane Elgin. Duane is an internationally recognized speaker, author, activist, and social visionary who looks beneath the surface turbulence of our time to explore the deeper trends that are transforming our world. In 2006, Duane received the International Goei Peace Award in Japan in recognition of his contribution to a global vision, consciousness, and lifestyle that fosters a more sustainable and spiritual culture. Duane is currently the co-director of the Choosing Earth project. His many books include Choosing Earth, Humanity's Journey of Initiation Through Breakdown and Collapse to Mature Planetary Community, The Living Universe, Promise Ahead, Voluntary Simplicity, Awakening Earth, and with Joseph Campbell and other scholars, he co-authored the book Changing Images of Man. In the early 1970s, he worked as a senior staff member of a joint presidential congressional commission on the American future, and as a senior social scientist with the think tank SRI International. Welcome, Duane. I'm so excited to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Stephanie, it's so wonderful to be with you. And we had a bit of a conversation before the show, and we found a deep rapport in our mutual interests and concerns. And I asked Stephanie right there on the spot, can we have more of a conversation instead of me just holding forth as an individual? And I think the viewers would appreciate hearing from you, your wisdom, your experience, and together, I think we can offer a wonderful offering to the community here.
Why, thank you. I let's do it. Let's do it, Duane.
Yes. All right.
We're here. I actually was quite fascinated reading about your personal journey in your book, and I would love for you to share a little bit how you got from where you were to this calling.
All right. Well, okay, for starters, I grew up on a farm. And deep down, I'm a farm boy. And I was working on a farm until I was 23. And so my roots are really in the land and the earth. And a good part of my work on choosing earth goes back to these early farming days when I was working with the earth. Now, at that same time, my mother was a nurse, and I was inspired by my mother to go into medicine, to become a doctor. And even though I was working on the farm, my vision was looking ahead and saying, I want to be a healer. I want to serve the well-being of humanity. And if I could summarize my life journey in a nutshell, it's that I moved from physical healing to social healing. And that transition took place in the 1960s when I confronted in my own life the Vietnam War. And my government wanted me to go off and kill people, and I wanted to go off and heal people. And this was an existential crisis in my life. And in many ways, what's happening to us right now as we confront an endangered earth and endangered future, we're being asked to consume the earth, to kill the earth in a metaphorical sense, when really so many of us want to heal the earth. We want to heal relationships. So this existential crisis that I faced is one I think we're all facing. Like it or not, we are all on this endangered earth, and we need to move in a healing direction. So that's a quick summary of a long journey.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And, it's interesting as you were telling your story, and I'm thinking about how I got here.
Yes.
And it's from a very different place, but it resonated with me a lot when I read about and also heard about, how, it's this, your sensitivity to everything around you, because we are human beings, we're part of the planet. And this incredible, at the moment, especially this trauma and this grief that we all feel.
Yeah.
And that's not just because of the recent pandemic. That, of course, has heightened everything. But it's been this sort of gradual, gradual destruction of life, of extinction of species, of the bees going away and not coming back. Um, and I'd like to talk about this because in my own journey, I've experienced a lot of death. And what I mean by that is I don't mean necessarily someone dying or a close relative dying. It's more having been very suppressed due to my particular childhood circumstances, and really from so many years trying to come back to my aliveness,
Mm.
and I was like, there's something missing, and I know this is not what life is meant to be. I know this is not what existence here is meant to be. And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. And I can feel this for a lot of people who are struggling in the same way, to really come back to their aliveness, and
Yes.
Duane, you talk so much about that, because it is, to me, so much of the crux of why we are where we are right now.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. I'd like to get your further reflections as well in a minute. My feeling is we've been dead too long. Let's come back to life. Let's wake up to the aliveness that surrounds us, that is within us and beyond us. There's been the assumption that we live in a universe of mostly dead matter and empty space, dead matter and empty space. Well, if that's the case, then everything that surrounds me and is beyond me is dead at the foundations. And if it's dead, well, let's exploit that which is dead for the few the humans that are alive. And that is just the shadow of a meaningful life, to walk around in. And this is the world that the mindset of capitalism. Let's exploit that which is dead for the few that are alive. An alternative view is to say, well, the whole thing is alive. And if it's alive, let's take care of it. Let's revere it. Let's acknowledge the aliveness that's everywhere. So physics, for example, is moving rapidly in this direction. Physics says, quantum physics says, it's a unified universe. I'm not an existentially separate being. I'm part of this whole. Not only the Earth as a living system, but the universe as a living system. And the world's spiritual traditions come to the same conclusion. They say not only are we connected with the totality of all that exists, but that totality is regenerating itself moment by moment by moment. And here we are. At every moment, a new universe is being created. At every moment, a new Stephanie is arising, and Duane. And there's so much energy, there's so much opportunity if it's recreating itself every moment. Well, then let's dive into this creative dynamic that we're all involved in. And I'll just mention another aspect of this. I had the good fortune to co-author a book with the scholar Joseph Campbell, and one of the world's foremost scholars on the world's wisdom traditions. And Campbell was once asked, well, isn't what people are really searching for meaning in life? Don't people just want meaning in life? And he said, no. I love that. He said, no, people are not looking for meaning in life. What they're looking for is the direct experience of being alive. That's what people want if they're pushing the edges in extreme sports, if they're pushing the edges of maybe scholarship, of art, of any part of life. What they're looking for is the direct embodied experience of being alive, being alive. When we die, we're not thinking about meaning, we're thinking about life itself, the immediate experience of life itself. And out of that generative experience of life itself comes action and inspiration and engagement, and it's juicy, and it's real, and you can just feel it in people that are in their own beings alive. So that's your turn. What do you?
And it's sexy too. There's something that's so connecting to life force is, and I have to agree. I have to agree with absolutely with Joseph Campbell. It's just feeling that you are, because any other piece of it, like having purpose in life and all of that, is, and having community is an aspect of this feeling alive, right? Because, and
That's right.
it's understanding our connection and how we relate to all the life that is around us is the generative force. And it's funny because the podcast is called How Things Connect, right? And of course, the more I learned about your work, I'm like, oh my God, this is so aligned, because I feel so much that this is the crux of it. And for me, how do I go from sort of that dead phase to where I am now, and feeling so much more in having so much more life force and feeling so much more connected to the world, is my particular journey was healing through plants. So I had some incredibly life-changing experiences with sacred plant medicine,
Yes.
through shamanic plant medicine ceremonial work.
Yes.
And that was and it's not, doesn't mean that everybody has to go through that particular channel, but for me it was that really direct experience with these master teacher plants that
Yes.
I got to actually rewire myself in a way, and let go of a lot of this death that was actually on a cellular level that I took in. And this is through our ancestry, this is through how we were raised, it's societal, it's around us as well. And that nature piece is so critical. And Buckminster Fuller talks a lot about systems and design thinking and living systems, and how, and you of course also talk about this, and it's really having that perspective, instead of, oh, we're the mighty human and we are sitting in this ego place of dominance, and then also then taking that in and applying that to how we run businesses and organizations and governments and nations, and and really understanding that no, we are actually part of this greater whole, and this is not some feel good new age way of looking at it. It is precisely what is, that we just refuse to see, and it is incredibly practical and incredibly abundant. And I will go absolutely that the next step to say that if we understand what this aliveness is, we can reap the benefit economically, financially, health, bodily, and in so many, it's in the entire aspect of what it means to be human. And that I think people really miss.
That's right. I just to add to what you're now saying beautifully. To summarize, there are three elements in a summary of the implications of this, and there are three words: reality, identity, journey. If the universe and reality is a living system, not dead matter and empty space, but deep down, foundationally alive, well, then if reality that we inhabit is a living system, well, then who are we? What is our sense of identity? Our sense of identity then moves from just this biological being to something much, much larger. Because once again, from a quantum physics perspective, we are a part of a unified whole. That's how the universe comes. It's already unified. You don't have to do anything to be a part of it. That is what's real, as you were saying. This is the foundation. This is the reality. So our identity is both biological, and we're part of the larger universe, a cosmic sense of identity. So it's the most accurate way to describe who we are is to say we are biocosmic beings. We're not just biological or biocosmic beings. Okay, Well, if that's who we are, then what is the journey that we're on? Well, directly, we are learning to live in a living universe. Whoa, this is amazing. We're learning to live in a living universe. I thought we were here to consume some things and try and be happy in a place that we just didn't quite understand. No, we are a part of this aliveness. We can feel it within ourselves, and we're learning to grow and deepen into that aliveness. Now that changes everything in life. Um, uh, for example, as you were saying, business. Well, what is the business that furthers not simply an existential isolation, but an opening to the world, to reality, to life, in ways that that really honor this truth that's already present. We are already a part of a living universe. So we can just explore this further later on, but every aspect of life, the learning that we receive, what is it serving? Is it serving us as consumers? Is it serving us as citizens of a living universe? Is a radical difference. Media, what kind of movies are we seeing? Are they movies of, well, let's duke it out between that biological ego and another biological ego and so on? No, it transforms how we relate to one another, see one another, feel one another, and so on. So every aspect of life is transformed when we honor the aliveness that's at the foundation of the universe. And this is where we started 10,000, 100,000 years ago. This is the original intuition that we held as a species, that we're a part of a field of aliveness. And it's only been in the last 300 years or so that we have pulled back from that aliveness and brought the universe down into this field of dead matter and empty space that we're now seeing is incredibly shallow, and we are now gifted with the opportunity. We're being pushed to move beyond that by the crises confronting the earth. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, speaking of a journey, we made some choices, right? We made some choices that chose death in many ways. And then now we are experiencing the effects of those choices, those initial choices.
Yeah.
We're in this place now as humanity, in a critical moment. And what's interesting is that, okay, there's all this, we're experiencing all the turmoil, whether it's geopolitical, climate, environmental, societal. There's another way to look at this too, right? Because if we are looking at aligning to aliveness, that then includes a moment that's absolutely necessary of being present to what's actually here, and then having that courage to feel what's around us in order to really make this a true initiation. Because otherwise you're just complaining and we're just all blaming each other, right? So we're just playing, oh, it's your fault, no, how come nobody's doing anything? Or else there's this feeling of complete hopelessness, and you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm just bury my head and just not think about it, right?
That's right.
And I feel like this is a message that, speaking of media, it's rare to find, because the focus is always on the fear.
Yeah.
Instead of understanding, what, these are gifts. The fact that, oh my God, we're noticing that, sea levels are rising, or we're noticing that the bees are no longer showing up to pollinate the crops. Well, then that gives us a point of reference from which then we can start to have a discussion, and also to understand that all of this is to allow us to go through this process. And the only way to go to the other side, get to the other side of this, actually, is to go through this,
Go through it.
and to go, and to take from a lot of indigenous traditions and a lot of mystical traditions. This is our dark night of the soul. Dark night of the soul is not a punishment. It is an opportunity for us to actually connect to the deepest part of ourselves and have a reckoning with ourselves, really, a truth confrontation with ourselves. And
Yes.
so, I feel that it's important for for us to talk about this, because all of us are feeling this. It doesn't even matter whether you're watching the news or not. It is in the ether, because we
That's
are
right.
all connected, and we can feel the burdens and the pain and the trauma and the pressure and the tension, right? And the sadness. And so how would you say, how do we go through this? How do we, you know, pluck up the courage? And how do we then, what is the guidance that you
Yeah.
would offer?
Well, you're getting to the crux of the matter as we go along. Um, Let me step back for just a moment and share some of my experience over more than 30 years. I've gone around the world. I have a wonderful opportunity to do that, giving talks. And often before I would give a talk, I would say, before I say anything, let me ask you a question. This is unsettling to many people. They said, well, you were just supposed to entertain me. Why you want me to answer a question right from the beginning? And yes. And the question is very simple. It's to say, what is the life stage of the human family? As you look at the world, the people on the earth, and how we're behaving, are we behaving like toddlers, teenagers,
Mhm.
adults, or elders? And I say, you've got four choices: toddler, teenager, adult, or elder. And I want you to turn to someone you've never spoken with before, have a conversation over the next 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to take a vote. And people are shocked that they are asked that simple, very direct question. And what happens is, within seconds, the whole community will explode into conversation. And after 5 minutes or so, I ask people, okay, let's take a vote. How do we feel about the life stage of the human family? And I say, instead of raising your hand, how about if you take a stand? Stand up for your point of view. And how many of you would then stand up that we are in our toddler stage as a human family? And typically, and this is true around the world, uh, uh, about 5% will stand up. And an audience of 1,000, 2,000 people, there's a sprinkling that are standing up. And I say, okay, great. How many of you feel we're in our adolescence as a species, our teenage years? And with that, often two-thirds to three-quarters of an audience will stand up. And just the physical mass of all these bodies standing up at the same time in response to this question, and seeing instantly, I haven't said anything, but they have agreement among themselves right there. There's already agreement. I haven't said anything to foster that. It's that they intuitively understood we're behaving like adolescents
Mhm.
as a human family. And it doesn't matter if they're young, they're old, Europe, the US, different parts of the world. We all have the same intuition that we're behaving like adolescents. And what we have to do is grow up. Now, that is not an easy task. Every person on this planet that's gone from their adolescence and into early adulthood typically has gone through some real traumas to get there. And waking up, growing up, that is challenging work. It's not easy work. And as you said, this is the dark night of the soul, to come to this place of saying, well, there's a deeper understanding, a deeper feeling about being here in life that really nurtures, whereas the consumer society does not. Um, so what we're seeing then is what you're saying. We can't go around this any more than as adolescents we could kind of get around our behaviors. We have to go through it and then go beyond it. And so that's where we are right now as a human family. We are confronting our adolescence. We're confronting the challenge of going through it. And if we go through it and come out on the other side of our early adulthood, we will look around the earth, we'll look at one another and we'll say, I see you, I know you. You're a living being just like me on a living earth and a living universe. Let's learn how to live in this together. And in learning to live together on a living, it changes the whole journey. It changes what we care about, what we focus on in our everyday lives, and how we relate to animals and plants and people and all the rest. So that's the journey we're on right now. It's a very simple journey in many respects, that of maturation, that of moving into our early adulthood. But it is a very challenging journey that we're being called to as a species.
Absolutely. No, totally. And, with teenagers, sometimes you just have to say, hey, you need an attitude adjustment. That's what you
Yes,
it's very
yes.
much like where we are today, right? And
So what is the attitude adjustment that the human family needs right now, Stephanie?
well, it's interesting because listening to what you just said, it also kind of is making me be a little devil's advocate, because I'm thinking, all right, there's you and I, we're having this conversation, we're already aligned, we're already on the same page. And there are a lot of people still, okay, despite what's happening, there's this, I think deep down there's a sense, but because they're so disconnected sometimes with themselves, a lot of times, right, that they're not even seeing it. I'm not sure what to say to that, except that if you don't look at the side that we're talking about, and you look at where we're heading, you've said this very well. You're like, okay, forgetting all of this talk about aliveness, the facts are that we are moving into, functional extinction in a way. There are essentially limited resources on this planet for the entire population if we continue on the same way. I mean, that's a fact. And that also what's happening with the planet is this impending risk of increasing authoritarianism, which you talk about a lot of, because people are in fear and they give away, they feel very disempowered, and it ends up, and we've seen this in history, in World War II, with the rise of Nazi Germany. You've seen this in throughout the histories of many countries, where you have a disempowered people who are isolated, divided from each other, and that makes room for someone to come in who is that percentage that you talked about that wants the death, because that's control still. So that they can then create a world that serves them, and then everybody else just submits to it. So I also think it's important, therefore, to show people, what's the alternative? Okay, you don't want to think this way. Do you want to go that way? I think most people would say no. And that's what we're seeing in real time right now around the world. So that's kind of what was making me think of, okay, how do we get people thinking more this, kind of just at least having a conversation that gets people into their feelings, at least.
Yes.
And the alternative in the attitude adjustment is, I feel, okay, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Because I feel like there's nothing, if I deny everything around me and I block myself off and I'm this deadened person, there's nothing to talk about. The attitude, okay, that will take us into those two other paths that I just discussed. But if we want to go into the aliveness, the first thing we must do is to feel, right? Is to kind of really just come into ourselves and start to have a relationship with our own inner being, first of all. And that is a certain raising of consciousness. And then beyond that, I feel a critical part is changing our relationship to the world as well as to ourselves and each other. How and why? Because, okay, if we're going to get through this and then we recognize what we're facing, we need each other. And there's no way, like each one of this rugged individualism that is so talked about, is so popularized and so heroic, at least portrayed as such, no longer serves. And therefore, that attitude adjustment is humility. Without that, And also without courage, which is another big part of it, in order to face this within ourselves, it takes courage to feel, everything around us, because it's a lot, right? And then also what we're going through. So I feel that those are two huge aspects, two aspects also of love, of what fundamentally and practically love actually means. It's not the romantic, fantasies. It's very much about what it takes to come into the aliveness.
Yes. Yes. Oh, there's so much to respond to what you're saying. Well, you mentioned humility. We're an arrogant species, I feel. We're just in love with our own power, it seems like. And the word humility, the roots of the word humility go back to the word humus. And humus is the soil, as well as something we might eat, but it's the soil, it is humus. And then the word human comes out of that as well. And so if we're really going to embrace our humanity, it's to embrace our humility as well as humus, as the soil of the earth. And and so that's one thing that you inspired me to say. Another is the magnitude of challenge that we're facing. Very few people understand how confronting our circumstances are right now. And I suppose that should be the case with an adolescent species. The adolescent, push the edge, let's rebel. Well, we are rebelling against nature. We're rebelling against human nature. We are so much out of touch with our deeper sense of aliveness that we're rebelling against the very things that are supporting our our aliveness. And how dangerous our situation is. One statistic. There's so many statistics we could use, but scientists now agree that the regenerative power of the earth, the oceans, the land, the atmosphere, and so on, the regenerative power of the earth can support roughly 2 billion people living at a European lifestyle, middle-class European lifestyle, 2 billion people. Well, here we are pushing towards 8 billion people right now. And with the United Nations saying we're likely going to go towards 10 billion people by the end of the century. So let's just consider 8 billion people. 8 billion people is 6 billion over the carrying capacity of the regenerative powers of the earth. We are way into overshoot, way beyond what the earth can sustain for any meaningful period of time. And that means, like it or not, we are probably going to have a massive die-off of humans as well as the rest of life, because we're in a major extinction phase right now on the earth. We're going to see a major extinction of humanity. Billions of people are likely to die here in the next generation or so. So this is serious stuff. It isn't just kind of philosophy and wouldn't it be nice? No, we're talking about survival of the species, and whether we're actually going to go through this time of initiation or pull back, and in pulling back, maybe to surrender to authoritarianism. And I know plenty of people and friends that say, look, well, maybe we just can't choose our way into this. Maybe we're just destined to surrender and give up and move into an authoritarian society. Well, it turns out authoritarianism is dramatically on the rise now. In the last 10 to 20 years, the authoritarian structures on the planet have progressed 2-to-1 over the democratic. We're losing democracy and our freedoms on this planet. And so it's going to require our maturity to reclaim our empowerment and our capacities to have a democracy and a free world that we live in. So these are very transitional times. And so what we're speaking about is it matters. These are way beyond just kind of philosophical conversations. These conversations matter. And one of the most powerful things that people can do because it was communication that enabled us to get here, it's our ability to communicate, I think, that's going to enable us to get further into the future. So one of the people say, what can I do? I say, well, let's begin the conversation about reality. Where are we living our identity? Who are we living in this universe and journey? Where are we going? If we can just begin to have that simple journey, and we're all alive, so it isn't somewhere way out there. It's deep inside, right here, right now. Our aliveness is right here. Well, speak to that. Talk to people about that. Talk to people about the aliveness of animals that are perishing on this planet. Talk to them about the plants that are threatened, and so on and so on. So we have the basis for beginning an inquiry to move through the dark night of humanity's soul and through a time of initiation, coming out the other side and finding friends, family, community among the people of the earth and the rest of life. So what an amazing time to be alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can we talk more, on a, let's say on a daily basis, right? Choosing aliveness. We talked a lot
Yes.
about that. How
Yes.
does one choose aliveness, right? So, so no, but right.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Talk about that because the idea, very basic thing, going into nature, right? Start building a relationship, start planting a garden. I mean, it's as simple as that. But
exactly.
That is not, but Duane, that is not an intuitive thing for people. And I think we need to talk about that because we've been so disengaged. We've been so detached from the soil, from nature, in our ivory towers in the cities, right? We don't, we've lost touch with that. I mean, people barely know even where their food comes from, let alone anything more about ecosystems. But it's important, and it's not, I'm joking, but I'm not really, because it's, how do we do this? How do we, on a daily basis, how do we nurture this aliveness?
Right. So wonderful question. Core question. Most people will say, well, my time in nature has been nurturing and awakening to me, getting outside of the, let's say, an urban, all human context, and remembering, oh yes, I'm a part of a larger ecology of life. And here's something I say to people, it comes out of my personal experience. I get discouraged doing this work. I get disheartened doing this work, and I'll go out for a walk. And I'll go into nature, and I'm walking along, but I'm still, in my heart of hearts, I'm discouraged, I'm disheartened, and I'm disconnected. I am disconnected. And so I'll say, okay, surprise me to the universe, surprise me to nature, because here I am, I'm feeling alienated, I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling disconnected. Surprise me with your life, with your aliveness. And Stephanie, within 2 steps, I ask people, try this. Just challenge nature. Say, well, okay, well, show me that you're alive. Surprise me. Within 2 steps, I will see the flight of a bumblebee, the structure, the architecture of a flower. The architecture of life is everywhere. But if I ask nature, well, surprise me. Okay, well, within 2 steps, I'm seeing things that I should have been seeing all along, but I just wasn't challenging myself to see life in its deeper aliveness. So what we're being asked to do, whether it's time in nature, time with a loved one, a sensual engagement with a loved one, playing with animals. I love animals. and so on. These simple things that we can do, making music and so on, painting, these don't cost a lot of money, but they all bring great satisfaction and a sense of connection and furthering my own evolution as a person. As I grow into my aliveness, I grow into my capacity to, as a feeling, experiencing person, to engage, go back and re-engage the world. So consciousness is foundational to being alive. We need to put our conscious attention on just the bare fact of our aliveness and how it feels to show up with another person with these tasks that we bring to everyday life. And in that we can grow. And so we are becoming a more reflective species. Just in the last several decades, a mindfulness revolution has been growing on the earth, not just in the West, but around the planet. There is a growing appreciation of mindfulness, of knowing how to be present with life. So we are learning the skills of adulthood, of early adulthood as a species. So that's a little taste. This is a huge conversation, as you well know, Stephanie, a little taste of how we can just naturally grow, surprise me, but naturally grow into being citizens of a living universe.
Absolutely. And I want to add to that something you've mentioned, which I think is really important, is getting to know your real gifts. So not the other kind. I can't remember now what you call the other kind of gifts.
True gifts and near gifts.
True gifts and near gifts. And I thought that was brilliant. Near gifts being things we're good at. Oh, I'm good at numbers, or I'm good at organizing, right? Versus true gifts, which are really gifts that only you have in a way.
That's right.
Unique to you. And that can be something entirely, of course, intangible as well. Talking about your uplifts for transformation, we talked about choosing aliveness, and then the second one is choosing consciousness, which you also just mentioned. This is part of that, is how conscious are we of these gifts, because that is part of, you could say, an entry point into our aliveness.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it's an entry point. So so many people are living out of their near gifts, things they're pretty good at.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty good at selling real estate. Well, I'm pretty good at organizing in a business and so on. Well, that's great. You can make a living doing that. Well, what is your true gift? Is it music? Is it caring for animals? You feel real just intuitive care and regard for animals or plants? Is it painting? Is it poetry? What is your true gift? Well, we are in a place where it's time to begin cultivating our true gifts and to find our satisfaction in life in those gifts, and not being drawn away from who we are at a deep level in our near gifts, things are pretty good at. Well, obviously we're probably going to have to do both, but cultivate those true gifts,
Right.
Celebrate those true gifts, know that those are the gifts that take us into aliveness, and aliveness is why we're here. We're learning to live in that aliveness and grow in our aliveness. And in that growth, we can be more compassionate with the world. We can be more considerate of others. We can have more fun just in being here. And so, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I really liked that one. And you had already mentioned choosing communication, have voice, like come into our own voice, our true voice, and share that with each other.
Yes.
It's very important, especially when there are a lot of, in some ways, destructive narratives out there. And we really, very destructive narratives, and we really need to create our narrative of this aliveness and of this love and this transformational way of being.
Yes.
That often we underestimate the impact of that. And
yes.
I wanted to say also is that, what we always forget is um, that because we're a part of a web of life and we're all interconnected, yet we forget that when we shift, just little old us, when we start to make different choices, we actually change the equation.
Yes.
And that is something that, often we forget, that we are part of that equation. It's not getting something to happen or make different out here. It is through our choices and our actions that we can change the whole game.
Yes.
And we tend to forget that.
We do
Yeah.
tend to forget that a lot. I want to pick up on one thing you said about a voice. We need to find our authentic voice, our of aliveness as individuals. We need also to find that, as you understand, as a whole species. And humanity got from 10,000 years ago, the place of awakening hunter-gatherers, to the verge of a planetary civilization, in no small part because we could communicate. And it was our capacity to communicate that allowed us to come together in all kinds of different configurations, business and government and arts and this and that, to create the verge of a planetary civilization. And so what is urgent right now is to keep going, keep going. Don't stop with communication that's more ego-based and nation-state-based and who's right, who's wrong, this and that. Rather, we need to move on to the voice of the earth, to find the voice of the earth in this time of deep transition. And people say, well, that's ridiculous. How in the world are you going to find a voice for the earth? And at that point, I just pull out this little technology here. And I say, 65% of the people on this planet right now have one of these.
Right.
2/3 of the people on this planet have one of these right now in their pockets. And you say, well, how are we going to do it? Well, the future is in your hands. There it is. There is the future. By the end of this decade, it's going to go from 65% to 75% of the people on the planet will have access to a cell phone. Now, I recognize there are firewalls in China and Russia and other parts of the world that are trying to encapsulate our communication. But this is a leaky communications world and environment, and it can reach out beyond nation state controls, and we can come together. So if we simply had a website that said, well, we need a voice for the earth voice, actually, I have that website. We need an earth voice. Well, we have the technology to do it. We don't have to spend billions of dollars building something. No, you just open up your cell phone. 65 to 3/4 of the people on the planet have one of these. Let's vote. And let's vote. Well, do you feel like a citizen of the earth? Beyond of your nation and so on. Did you feel like a citizen there? Well, yeah, I'll vote for that. Well, how do you feel about climate change? Does that bother you? Do you think we need to take dramatic action? Well, yes, we need to take action. So not only my identity is been registered, my desire for action. Well, what if other people feel a sense of esteem? They look at you and say, well, way to go, people of the earth. Then we're evolving our identity in just seconds if we begin using this tool of collective communication to come to a collective consciousness and a collective understanding about our early adulthood. And we're right there. We're moving through the dark night together, together. And we feel camaraderie, we feel community. We feel, yes, we can do this. It isn't just me alone, it's us together doing it. So communication is critical to our common future.
And definitely that, and choosing community, which is another point you always talk about.
Yes.
And, part and parcel of that is actually it's really stepping out and seeing how is it that can we relate on these much less tribal, in a way, in much broader ways, but in a context that is relevant to where we want to be as a whole, in this transformational, like the direction that we want to go to, right? So, okay, if we understand at this point, all right, bickering with each other just isn't going to work,
It
right?
won't.
Whether on a
Mhm.
very minimal level, it's like, oh, are you vax, anti-vax? Are you Democrat, Republican? Are you
Right.
okay? So it's not, you just, everybody's kind of sick of that, right? So then, okay, what are the ways that we can actually find the commonality? And how is it that we can expand this identity? Because when we actually do that, like you said, we actually find a lot more commonality.
That's
Do
right.
you like the sunshine? Yes. Do you like clean air? Yes. It sounds childish almost, but therein actually lies the simplicity of this in a way. And the key to this is that when we can define ourselves in these broader aspects, we actually can come together much, much more to solve all the problems and the crises that are facing us today. And
That's right.
no, it's again, it sounds simplistic, but there is a lot of wisdom to that. And it's a practice, I think, that is very healthy to cultivate, like you said, and we need to get on Earth Voice,
Yeah.
and, choosing community. I also would love to ask you about choosing simplicity, because that's something
Okay.
we also talk about
Yeah.
a lot of. Can you elaborate
Yes.
on that and how this relates?
I think it was Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And so many people think about simplicity as regressive. We're going back to some prior way of life and such. Um, Actually, simplicity is sophistication in this new world that we're living in. How, if we are living way beyond our means right now, and by the force of necessity, we have to pull back from that. Uh, well, how do we do so in a way that's aesthetic, that's elegant, that's connecting with nature, that is awakening our sense of alive connection with all that exists? So we're in the midst of a design revolution. And it's not simply to consume less food, perhaps, or a different car. Those are important. It's the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear, the car that we drive, the house in which we live, and all that. They're all areas of bringing the wisdom of simplicity. Um, but what an exciting time as a designer, if you will, to be alive, to design ourselves into a world that not only works, but that celebrates the deeper aliveness of the living universe. This is amazing, the opportunity for transformation that we have right now, and the need for transformation. As we look back at the 80% of the people on this planet that are struggling for an existence, if you will, the 20%, you and I are just at the most, um, we have such well-being compared to the majority of people on the planet. So simplicity cuts through the complexity of life, through the distractions, and it brings us really right into uh, more of an embodied, direct feeling connection with life. And so, once again, it's the ultimate sophistication is simplicity. You know, one thing I would mention about the work that you and I are exploring, and that is how important it is to expand our perspective as
Mhm.
humans. Um, uh, in the work that we're doing, we're saying, look, we have to look more broadly. But what we're facing is much more than a climate crisis. It's a crisis of species extinction. It's a crisis of resource depletion. Fresh water is becoming scarce around the planet. It's a crisis of inequities, of imbalance. So there are all of these areas intertwined that connect with one another. So we have to look broad. But actually, we also have to look deep. And you and I have been speaking about this. Let's look beneath the surface of life and into the invisible realm, so to speak, of aliveness that have meaning and power to enrich our lives. So we have to look broad. We have to look deep. We also have to look long. And typically, governments are looking 3 to 5 years into the future, and that's about it. Businesses often will have a 1 year time frame, not 5, but 1 year. So the book Choosing Earth looks 50 years into the future, and it draws on hundreds and hundreds of scholarly reports and explorations to do that. So if we look wide, deep, and long, our perspective on life will be transformed. And we need to recognize that the world we're living in is a perspective that's narrow, it's shallow, and it's short. And if we have a world that's narrow, shallow, and short, we're going to be good consumers in a dying earth. But if we're looking wide, deep, and long, we're going to be citizens of a living universe, citizens that are saying, well, let's grow into this. Let's move through these times and into a time of new possibility. So evolving our perspective, wide, deep, and long, that's really important to making this path through.
That's very well said, Duane. Absolutely. And that's part of our choosing maturity, maturing from a teenager who's all about immediate satisfaction. I mean, that's actually even toddler immediate satisfaction. But one other aspect, when you were talking about all the inequities and imbalances in the world, whether it's in nature or societal or gender or race or whatever it is that's really, to me, part of the same dis-ease. It's the same core of, I don't want to simplify things, but at the same time, at the crux of it, it's this separation that we have of, us versus them, right versus wrong. And you talk about choosing reconciliation. And what do you mean by that? And how would that apply to these imbalances that we've been talking about?
Golly, as you just mentioned, we're so divided as a species, and it's divisions are understandable in the realm of the adolescent mindset, where it matters. Well, who am I? Well, I'm here and you're there, and I'm not a part of your tribe. I'm in my tribe. Who's in, who's out? And separation. Well, you look different to me. Well, we're separated in terms of how we appear, or by gender, or by affluence, or by geography, or by age, and so on. All of these separations are compromising our ability to feel whole and to feel at one with the larger body of life. And well, there's all of these differences and all the rest, but underneath all of that is a deeper wholeness that's already true. We don't have to work to make that so. It is so. Let's discover what's already true, the wholeness in the universe, in the world, in the civilization in which we live. So this is really, really key. In some ways, is one of the most foundational challenges that we face, is to open to the potential and the reality of healing these divisions, ourselves and other animals, ourselves and future generations. We're just the divisions are everywhere. And so reconciliation is coming to wholeness, and in coming to wholeness is coming to life. So that's foundational as one of the core themes for making this journey through these times of challenge and into a more healing future.
I want to address something that is part of everything that we just said. It is calling for us to have forgiveness for ourselves and forgiveness of each other. It's
That's
part
right.
of the whole equation. And with that, there is a letting go, because we, in order to move forward, on this path of transformation, should we so choose, instead of the other directions of annihilation, there has to be that, because we are also learning, right? None of us are perfect. We are all um, flawed, and it is through this process of interacting, of interconnecting, of that we begin to learn, and we begin to shed some of the things that no longer serve us, whether it's behaviors, attitudes, whatever, that don't serve anyone. And it really, I feel it's important to bring up, because there is again this frequently ingrained pattern of guilt, right?
Yeah.
And we beat each other up, but we beat ourselves up a lot. And I just want to say that throughout this whole process, it doesn't serve anyone to harbor and make this guilt their sort of cloak of martyrdom, almost. Like, it doesn't serve. And it's okay, like, okay, maybe a year ago I thought in a way where I wasn't so conscious, and that's okay. And I feel this is such an important message, because we need everybody. We need everyone. And it's okay. And we have to be able to let go of that, and let go of those attachments in how we judge ourselves and each other. And that is a big part of the how, I feel, to get to that next point.
Yeah, absolutely. uh, one one of my favorite words is perfection. Perfect. Now, a lot of people say, well, look, I'm not perfect. And I'll say, wait a minute. There's one definition of the word perfect that means when something is whole, complete, and without omission. Whole, complete, and without omission is perfection. Now, I say, well, look, we all have parts of ourselves that we want to disown. But if we want to be whole, complete, and without omission, we have to own it. We have to say, well, yeah, I do things this way and that, and I haven't done this and I haven't done that, and I feel like I'm not perfect. No, you are perfect, because if you're perfect, you're going to bring it all in. Exactly. Just bring it all in. Be it. Just say, yes, that's who I am. That's what's happening. That's what's real. And in that wholeness, there is a larger aliveness that can blossom. And that's where we started this conversation.
Yes.
So yes, in the wholeness, in the perfection of owning the limitations that we have as just regular people. Exactly. We're just regular folks here. Exactly. Then we can grow. We can say, oh, I'll just relax then. I can just be who I am. Yes, that's right. And who you are is amazing. It's extraordinary. So yes, thank you.
Spectrum. No, thank you. And it's full spectrum, because this goes back to, prior to this interview, when you and I were chatting, it's this idea that, of what you were defining as perfection is encompassing everything, right? So it's never, and that also means not disowning or disassociating ourselves from a piece of us that we don't like, or we're like, oh, we don't want to look at. And, that, and when we can do that with ourselves, right, we find so much more freedom and liberation of how we relate to other people. Because we're no longer as judgmental, we're no longer as prejudiced. We're just like, okay, it doesn't mean anything goes, right? But it does mean, what it does mean is that we become, the relationships become a lot more real, like you said.
That's right.
And also,
yes.
and if it's not real, you cannot possibly have love. Like it's just anathema to the whole idea, right? And I guess to wrap up, I would love to just say that it's the full spectrum of aliveness we're interested in.
Yeah.
And, that's including the sadness, including the anger, frustration, and the feelings that are maybe negative. It's all of it. And
it's all of it.
Because that is part and parcel of being alive. And when we can allow ourselves to flow that way, whether we're excited and exhilarated, or whether we're sad, or feeling lost or in pain, it's okay. When we embrace this, we are able to embrace each other in the world, and we can actually find a way forward.
Yes. Yes. Well said, Stephanie. Well said. This has been wonderful to share a conversation with you, not an interview, but a mutual conversation. And thank you for stepping up to that challenge.
Thank
You
you.
were perfect.
Honestly, Duane, I am so excited that we had this conversation and that this flowed the way that it did,
Yeah,
because we chose our aliveness. We're like, okay,
that's right.
let's
Do this.
what's the
Yes.
most alive way, as you suggested, thank you very much, of how we can conduct this podcast, right?
That's
So
right.
that flow is in itself such a I love this practice. Like what we just did is, where the rubber meets the road. It's like,
That's right.
how do we come into our own aliveness in this conversation? And
That's
so
right.
I so appreciate that. And that
Yeah.
was a great teaching for me. Thank you,
Yeah.
Duane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And where can people support you best? Should they go to choosingearth.org or
Yes.
duaneelgin.com?
Choosingearth.org.
Mhm.
And there's a free copy of the book, Choosing Earth, there, a PDF. You can download it for free. You can give it away for free. Send it to everyone you know for free. And so this is a radical idea for someone with a background in business, as I have, to say, no, our times are so urgent. We're just going to give this book away, Choosing Earth. And there's a copy of the book.
Yes.
So that is available for free. My wife created an hour-long documentary on essentially choosing Earth and choosing life and facing the adversity of our times. That's available for free on the choosingearth.org website. You can also, there's a ton of resources there that are also freely available. You can look into courses that we teach about the whole choosing Earth dynamic that's described there in the book and in Colleen's film. So the best place to go is to the choosingearth.org. And the best thing that people can do is to say, get a copy of the book, read it if you're up for it, and then go to Amazon. Amazon is being published on Amazon, and Amazon is the second most powerful search engine on the planet for books. And if you leave a rating and review for the book on Amazon, it will affect scientists, activists, teachers, and many people around the planet, and they will begin to bring the messages of let's choose the Earth and our future together. So that would be the biggest thing that people could do.
Fantastic. And you just reminded me, I've just read the book, and everyone who hasn't read it, really, it's extraordinary and wow, and incredibly deep and moving and profound. And so I've got to go and leave a review on Amazon.
Oh, great. Thank you, Stephanie. Yes.
So thank you again, Duane, for coming on the
So
show.
welcome.
I will put all those details in the show notes as well, so people can
Okay,
see.
great. Blessings. Take care.
Take